I think businesses must be fascinated with the prospects of intuition because they see it as a shortcut somehow, as a quicker way to get things done. Do you think that's the hook?
Yeah, I think that's part of the hook. I think it's also part of the reflection of the change in the environment that we have now that's clearly going to lead into the next 20 years of rapid change and crisis and unfolding of events that in the past were much more stable or more predictable. Mm-hmm. And so the more traditional management techniques are becoming less and less useful. In many ways they're useful for a picture of yesterday rather than what's coming tomorrow. So the capacity to pick up the first faint tap of a new trend becomes a critical skill now in the next 20 years.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting that you think of intuition as a new trend, and it certainly is in business, but I suppose if we look at anthropology and the development of humankind, intuition as a brain skill is something that is probably highly cultivated in indigenous cultures around the world.
Yes, I think that's true, but at the same time, one of the advantages of the last 20 years is the breakthroughs in terms of hard science knowledge about how the brain functions. Mm-hmm. And as people have been talking of the decade of the brain, part of what's been taking place of late and has inspired interest, I think, in the practitioner community is the recognition that there are new things that we know and are learning about the brain that we didn't know just 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. And you could kind of be summarized that in the last decade we've learned more about how the brain functions than we have in the history of man, and we know less about how the brain functions than we do about how to get to the moon. So the upside potential for productivity is clearly there, and organizations are very interested in that potential.
And I would imagine that we're at a time in history where businesses realize that the people who work for them are their greatest asset, and if they can enhance the mental functioning or the use of that incredible computer that each person
Right.
has, the biocomputer of the brain, that it becomes imperative. That is, if they don't do it, they may lose ground.
That's correct, and it becomes a focus not only of how do you tap the potential of individuals in organizations, but to tap the potential of all the individuals together as an organizational entity. Mm-hmm. So it's an individual and an organizational approach and focus that becomes critical.
Yeah. At the same time, I'm guessing that a lot of organizations are very skeptical about this approach. There's something too mystical, too undefined, or magical about it. Do you run into that?
A great deal.
Mm-hmm.
And part of what I find useful in working with organizations is to begin with some of the symbols that they're most comfortable with. Let's say in workshops where if you're dealing with engineers, they might be most comfortable with something like a typical paper and pencil test that they can kind of immediately get into and see their own individual results rather than talking about definitions of what intuition is, or work on a real live problem that they want to solve that day. I often will ask at the outset, what is a problem that you're trying to deal with, that you've been wrestling with, that you haven't got apparent answers to, and by the end of that day, the test of the success of this workshop is going to be, have we solved that problem, or have we got some new avenues that you hadn't thought of before?
Mm-hmm. Well, it sounds like what you're saying when I hear you describe this work is that one of the most fundamental aspects of intuition is self-knowledge.
I think it's self-knowledge in two ways. Self-knowledge at an individual level mm-hmm. and at an organizational level. Mm-hmm. Very often knowledge exists in an organization, but it's not listened to. So there's an individual listening that's necessary, mm-hmm. and then there's an organizational listening that's necessary, which means that in part you've got to encourage and establish processes at an organizational level also to listen to the individuals in your organization, no matter what their job title or years of experience.